We've got two presenters. Jim Cook started in the Wildland Fire Service in 1975. Served 18 years as Hot Shot Superintendent, 15 of those Arrowhead Hot Shots Peru. So retired in 2012 as the National Training Projects Coordinator for the U.S. Forest Service at NIFSI, holding a master's in instructional design. And Ken Kremensky, 48 years in the fire service, started in 1976 with CDF, Warner Springs, Lakeside Fire Protection District, and retired as a division chief, a volunteer at Crest Fire Protection District in Julian. Thank you. Julian. Currently the fire chief of Verona Fire Department, served on IMT's California Team 2 and SoCal Team 1, and other team assignments and operations. Jim and Ken.
It's a little tag team here. Jim's going to start off here, son.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
When I worked here in the 1980s and 1990s, I always heard about the legendary Western fire work together. We made it. I have to admit, yesterday, in the hand for first time it went up, I find this one of them. I think I was one consumer first fiber. When I got here, I learned this group has been rolling for 90 years, and I also learned that it was legendary. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you. Have a caveat. Bill Columbia and Ken Kremensky kind of arm twisted Andrew out of deep retirement to do this. I think this is the first PowerPoint presentation I've done for large groups of every 5-12 inch, but forgive the notes. Historic milestones. 2024, 30 years since South Camden, right? Particularly, our subject today is 75 years since Mann, Gulch, all smoke covered and one fire guard killed on Conda National Forest.
We're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I see. Is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Anyway, what I want to do is start with the when, where, and why before Ken talks a little bit about the what. So, we probably make with her here. Look at this and about it. That is such fun. I think we have backup. Batteries. So, anyway, like I said, we're going to do a little orientation to when, where, and why before we do the what. Mann Gulch is one of our most well-known tragedies, and it's one of the hardest to get to. We're going to start here in central Montana, between Helena and Great Falls, along a section of the Missouri River that Lewis and Clark traveled in 1805 in July. They camped there. The area around Mann Gulch is really spectacular geologically. Lewis and Clark named it Gatesville Mountains. They're sheer 1,000-foot cliffs that literally come right out of the river for several miles. And so it goes. We're going to take a little closer look here. And by the way, we're on the east side of the Continental Divide, where the fuel types transition from heavier chipper fuels to lighter flat sheet fuels on the east side of Montana. We're going to spin around here. You can see a faint outline of the final footprint. You see the drainages that the river bisects. On the right here, you see the red rock that's on the north side of Mann Gulch that will be a key point in the story. We're gonna spin around here, we're gonna be looking up Mann Gulch. So 3 drainages here are the key to the story. Here's Mann Gulch itself, right here. Mouth of Mann Gulch, the head of Mann Gulch. This over here, Meriwether Gulch. Lewis and Clark actually camped there, that's why it's named Meriwether Gulch. It's actually Meriwether Canyon, you can see it's a detail. And key part of the story here, the fire guard station is here at the mouth of Meriwether Canyon. He is actually the first initial attack person on the fire. And Rescue Gulch is this little smaller gulch north of Mann Gulch. And that is where it's named because of the rescue operation that happened after the fire. That's how I was saying. Happened the purpose. Okay, here we are looking down at the Missouri rivers from the head of Mann Gulch. Reorientation to the drainages north, Rescue Gulch is over the top, and Meriwether Canyon is here to the south. The fire originally was up here above the mouth of the canyons on the north aspect of Mann Gulch. And a jump spot is in this vicinity here for orientation. Well, one observation, I guess, on this. A lot of you go to, I can tell talking with everybody here, a lot of you are really interested in going to sites and learning from the past. I've found personally when I go visit a tragedy site, it's almost always smaller and closer to nature than what I pictured from reading the reports and the maps. This one is an awesome. You get there, it is huge. Okay, a couple features to keep in mind as we go through the story. This is the mouth of Mann Gulch, narrow, densely timbered. One person accessed the fire here, Raymond Jast. He was the district ranger. Some calendar ranger distance, and he came into the fire here. We'll learn more about that, but there's 10 ghosts at the story. This is the rim rock. This is the rim rock on the north side of Mann Gulch. And it's anywhere from 8 to 15 feet tall. It's in the broken stratus, and it's not continuous, but it's a pretty significant feature. And you'll notice the steepness of the approach on the left side, which is where, again, there's this in Mann Gulch down here. This rim rock is on the north side of Mann Gulch. Okay, let's talk a little bit about firefighting in 1949. Helicopters, first time helicopters were ever used on a fire were in Canada and Alaska in 1946 for some aerial recon. The first actual contract helicopter was on the Angeles National Forest in 1947, only 2 years prior. Hot shots, 1947, that's when hot shot crews were started. Remnants of the CCC crew. By 1949, we could count the number of hotshot crews in the country on one hand. Air tankers, still 6 years in the future, and they're just seats, right? And that's what the smoke jumpers were carrying for saws. Chainsaws didn't come to our business till the 50s. And lastly, the 10 standard firefighting orders were how far in the future? Almost 10 years of future, right? Yeah. Developed, sort of, from the report that we heard Carlton talk about yesterday. They weren't issued and really in effect till 1958-59. That's when the chief of foreign service put out fire control notes, memorandum that people the way we do business. So none of that stuff was really part of their repertoire of tools. Okay, we're going to talk about the smoke jumpers themselves. This is a picture that was taken right after they finished their training in July, early July. So back in the day, this was kind of a 90-day adventure for kids going to school. Smoke jumper program was in its 9th year. And 4 of those years, From 1942 to 1946, the smoke jumper program is pretty much staffed by Buffalo soldiers and Conchies. So who knows what those are? Buffalo soldiers, black regiments in the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army was not integrated until 1949. So Buffalo soldiers and Conchies were conscientious objectors. A lot of men don't tend to see smoke jumpers during the war years.
It was.
Yeah, we'll just move on to the aircraft. So here's the DC-3 that delivered folks to Mann, Gulch. And it's got a story too. It was built in 1944. DC-3 was a workhorse in the time. They were the airplane that made to commercial airline travel viable. They were a workhorse during World War II, moving folks around. This particular airplane delivered folks to Mann Gulch. 5 years later, it was hauling troops back from the Korean War and pancaked into the Monongahela River. 9 GIs and pilots drowned in that accident, 12 got out. Fast forward to 2017, we won't go back up. It served the U.S. military and the U.S. Forest Service till 2001, continuously in operation. It was mothballed 2017, taken out of mothballs, refurbed, flown over to Europe for the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So the aircraft's quite historic. Okay, so in its time, Mann Gulch caused the same uproar that South Canyon did, that Yarnell did. One of our first formal reviews of the fatality fire, and they've had lots of drama. Life magazine, which was the social media platform at the time. Some of us of my age remember Life magazine. Everybody had it. It wasn't the National Enquirer, by the way, it was legit. And Hollywood did a movie, Red Skies in Montana, that was loosely based on these events. Got some big names at the time, Richard Widmark, Jeffrey Hunter, those guys were big time stars back then. And it was a catalyst for the U.S. Forest Service to start looking at fire behavior as a science. And eventually, after the Rattlesnake fire happens, after the Kibbalah happens, the Missoula Fire Lab starts to become a reality. Lots of things have been written about this. Norman McLean is probably the most well-known. He started his efforts in mid-70s. He actually visited Mann Gulch with two of the survivors, Rumsey and Sully, in the late 70s. He went there with a smoke jumper that was a pretty well-known researcher for fire behavior. Did a lot of calculations. His book, which I think is probably the more academic and scientific approach, is Read. It's a deep read. He never finished it. It was published in 1992 after his death. His son, John McLean, and the editors actually finished it from his manuscripts for the last third. So it's an interesting book to read. You can see his style for about the first 2/3, and then it goes off on a different direction in the last third. And then A Great Day to Fight Fire is a whole different approach. It's stories about each of the individuals all in their life, and it's a very interesting read, I think. And it's kind of like the 3 books about Yarnell. You read all 3 of them, you get a better picture of the whole event. Yeah. All right. Yeah. This incident kind of crosses into other endeavors. Been used as a case study in several business schools. Dr. Mike Busey, who's the director of the Wharton School of Leadership, wrote a book, talked about 9 different stories of triumph and disaster. Anything from climbing accidents to UN rescue operations, and why God is one of the 9 stories he writes about. And then Dr. Carl White, he looked at it from a little different perspective. He looked at more about organizational function and dysfunction. And he'd written, lectured on it extensively as a paper that he wrote collapse and sediment organizations. And then Gulch disaster. So I kind of always thought if other people can look at us and learn something from our way back, we can probably do the same. And so that's kind of the when, where, and why. And we'll let Ken take over for the what here.
Okay, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us. I think we can learn from all these fatality fires going out there. I think this is something we need to do for the younger folks that are coming up in the fire service. Chris Cam, what happened? Van Gulch had a lightning strike, August 5th, 1949. That day, had a lightning strike up right in here. And that is up there above Mann Gulch. They dispatched the smoke jumpers out of Missoula. It was a really hot day. Helena, which is pretty close to there, 97 degrees, record-breaking temperature day. They launched the folks out, all very young. I think the most experienced was Wag Dodge, and I think that was right around 10 years on the job, and everybody else went down. A lot of college students. A lot of veterans that had been in the war came out, some paramilitary folks, but they launched off and went to the fire. They described Bob Sully, who we'll hear about in just a little bit here. Very rough plane ride. 2 or 3 of the smoke jumpers got sick. One was so sick he couldn't jump, had to go back. Kind of thinking about situational awareness for me is weather. Drew was talking about that earlier, the National Weather Service. So, there's some things already going on. That's a really hot day. We have a lightning storm. Instability's pretty high because the plane ride is a lot of turbulence. So they circled the fire. There was a high altitude jump. Wag Dodge and his squad captain, as they flew by, took a look at the fire. They thought it was pretty doable. Looked like the fire wasn't moving out too much, pretty slow moving. Probably about 20 acres sitting up on the ridge. Although it was pretty turbulent, they thought they could jump it, so they did. They went ahead, they jumped, and landed up where Jim showed you right up in here, landed up in there. That north side of Van Gulch, the south slope, is pretty much grass, a few light timber trees in there, so pretty favorable for jumping. They dropped their equipment down. One of the first things that became an issue when they went to retrieve the equipment was their only handheld radio got busted on that and was not working, so no communications, didn't wake down stock. So the crew went ahead, moved on down. They sat up there. Wag Dodge said, guys, you grab some food. So they got their sea rats out, were eating while he went up and checked out the fire, where he tied in with Ranger Jansen. Came back down, told the crew that ready to kick off. He was concerned. He told the squad captain, I want you to take the crew and move down toward the mountain, Van Gulch. And said it's real thick reef rock in there. He was concerned it was a death trap for him. And so they went ahead and started moving down the canyon. They came down. They were side healing, high side hilling as they try to move down that way. And the wind started to pick up. I think Wag Dodge kind of knew what was going on there. And the winds coming out the canyon started blowing about 25 miles an hour. Caused the fire to flare up. Bob Sully and Runcie, they had the big crosscut saws, they were carrying out. Wag Dodge, he didn't communicate much from the reading that I see. Very man, very few words. But he was walking with them, he told them to drop their saws, that they were going to hurt somebody. And Sully, he said something was up, he kind of figured the fire just did worse or something. So they dropped their saws, they continued on, and then the fire spotted down below the canyon there. This fire spotted down in here, started burning here, got aligned in here in the canyon, so told them to step back up to the ridge. Very, very steep country in there, which they did. They started up there. He told everyone to drop their packs. Pretty much everybody dropped, but one guy Seawork was a really tough ranger in this game. That if you dropped his pack, you'd be in big trouble. Like, they started running up, put Sally and Rumsey in the front, because Saws always were at the back. Well, then reversing and going back up took them high up. So they were moving up the slope. Wag Dodge and the rest of the crew was going up there. It's not a lot of communications. The fire was roaring up there. Sally says it was like being on the air strip, just roaring up behind us as I'm ripping out the hillside. They were standing there as they were moving up. Wag Dodge decided to light an escape fire, which at the time just didn't happen, right? So they were kind of like, the crew was like, what's this guy doing? Gets down, lights a fire, starts grass on fire, and starts moving up the slope. And he told everyone, get the burn with me, come on. And they didn't have a lot of good communications, and I think beforehand, so the crew didn't trust Wag. So they just continued to run, said, this guy's crazy, we're not doing that. They continued up the steep slope, trying to get away from the fire. Wag Dodge jumped in there. Sully and Runcie continued up the slope where the rock scree is. Wag Dodge put a handkerchief over his face, wet, laid down at the burn there. Sully and Runcie made it up and over the top, and they got up. And as soon as they dropped on the other side, they got the rescue Gulch. Their school there. They saw a huge rock outcropping, so they ran down into there, took cover there. The fire swapped over the ridge. Goes with more of a backing fire down in there. They basically stayed in there, moved back and forth, and rode it out, and were okay. They weren't sure about the rest of the crew, so they ended up going and looking for them. And this is what it looks like while the fire was going. You can see how steep it is up there. I've been there. Some of you have been out there. It's very, very steep terrain. That's some kind of like the fire conditions in there. So there's over down here at Gulch. I don't think they keep going. So continue on. Sally and Runcie decided to go back up and see what's going on. They went up and they heard someone yelling. They found Phil Tillman. He was burned, badly burned. He made it up to the top of the ridge, but the fire got it in the back, burned the clothes off the back of his body. They went ahead and moved him to a rock, got him out of the soot, laid him there, and then Sally was going to continue down to try and find, see if there was any other survivors from anybody else. The tree still had fire in it. He was kind of spooked and decided that it wasn't a good idea to continue down in there, so he headed back up to the ridge where Rumsey and Pelton were. And Wag Dodge had yelled out. He made it, so he yelled out to Sully, said that he ran into Joe Sylvia, who was also run very bad, put him on the rocks. So they left Rumsey up there with the two burn victims, and Sully and Wag Dodge headed back down toward the Missouri River. They went down to the river and found either fishermen or some boaters down there that were watching the fire. Flags went down. They went down to the Meriwether Guard Station, where Wag and Jansen started to communicate to try and get a rescue group together. Sully was wiped out. He went and was crashed out behind the fire station and fell asleep. They woke him up about 10 at night. They'd gotten rescue folks there, brought them in on boats, doctors and things like that. So they told them we're going to go back up and retrieve the folks up there. So they headed back up the river, hiked up, and were able to get helmet and down to the river to get him out. He got the other individual, and basically Sully didn't know that the rest of the crew passed for 2 days. So that was kind of the rescue operations, and then they went up right away and then started to move casualties at the location of where the rest of the crewmen that died. They moved out. And these are the folks that are perished, support the memorialize them and remember them for what they did and the guards on it. Robert Bennett, just from Paris, Tennessee, 22. You can see the age is pretty young. Opening church, 19, Moscow, Idaho, which is near Coeur d'Alene. James Harrison, who grew up in Missoula, Montana. William Hillman, the Kalispell, Doug McVeigh from Bath, Montana, David Navone from Modesto, Leonard Pfeiffer from Blairsville, Pennsylvania, Stanley Reba from New York, Marvin Sherman from Missoula, Joseph Sylvia, Plymouth, Massachusetts, Henry Kalispell, Ethan Thompson from Alhambra, and Silas Thompson from North Carolina. See, they're from all over the country. Amazing. All again, folks. Bob Salee, he was 17 when he got on the hot shots. He was 17 when this happened. Right about his age. They're supposed to be 20, become 7 But he was making $1 an hour, and the hot shots were paying $1.37. So that was a big kill back then. It was 37 cents to raise. That's like game of smoke jumper. The folks that survived was Wack Dodge. He was the foreman. He was 33 at the time of the fire. Robert Jansen from the Holiday District Ranger, 34 at the time. And then the Walter, the one at the time of the fire of Kansas. Lee, of course, was the youngest man on the crew, 17. He is from Bull Creek, Montana, grew up in Sandpoint, Idaho. He's the last survivor, died May 26, 2000, plus young age 8. He was here. Don had brought Sully here, and then I saw him in Orange County the other Don. Yeah, I'm there. Really nice man, big man, quiet, stature. Kind of had a little connection. I was born in Spokane, so he was in Spokane, so I got to know him fairly well a few times, got to talk to him, so it's pretty messy and talking to him and his account, so it's fun. I think after the fire, he basically went under the radar. He did. They took him back down, them and Rumsey, and on see if he wanted to do a small company. He said, yeah, so they put him on a small fire. Then he came back the next day to jump some more, then went into the paper industry. We really didn't tell his family much about it or anything like that, but I think when McLean started to write the book, he contacted Sully and kind of came to Sully that it was his purpose to make sure that none of the folks were forgotten. What he remembered, that was his quest in his later years, just to make sure he could tell a story, tell about those folks, to remember for others, Steve Wood from Houston. Okay, Sal, you couldn't reveal. This is an interview. It's about 15 minutes. That's from a Dick Corbin NPR, but it's completely
and much lower elevation. And the fires at the Olympus, burning on the top of the ridge, where God just having the foreman heard someone shouting up by the fire, so he told the squad leader to have us get something to eat because we're going to be working all night, and that he'd go up and check the fire. And he started breaking out some rations, and then we started up to the fire. We got about 200 yards up the hill, and then we got Wag Dodge, who was our foreman, coming back out the hill. When Dodge got down to where we were, he told our squad leader to take us down the canyon to the river. He said, I don't like this thick reproduction. It's a blizzard.
The Man Gulch fire is described in the book Young Men and Fire by Norman MacLean. He wrote, the grass in places was waist high. Since it was early August with blistering heat, the worst of both fire worlds could occur. If a fire started in the deep timber at the southern side, and then jumped to the explosive grass and shrubs of the northern side, as this one might and shoot, it could run so fast you couldn't escape it, and it could be so hot it could burn out your lungs before it caught you. I'm Dick Corbin, when you're listening to the story. Early on, Bob Sully had no idea he was in any danger. He couldn't even see the fire.
We didn't have any signs at all. We knew it was up there, but there wasn't any smoke down where we were either. So anyhow, we went down into the draw, crossed over, and started angling up the other side a little bit. And now you're into that part of Man Gulch that's so steep. So you're kind of angling along the side of the hill.
And it's pretty easy going, right? Because it's grass and rock and a few trees on this side.
Yeah, right. It's not hard to if you want to try to go in hurry. So we probably went a quarter of a mile or 3/8 of a mile down the draw, and White Dodge caught up with us. And he had seen that wind had come up and that the fire was getting really active up on the gulch. And so he went to the head of the line. Now, Kremensky and I were both carrying cross-cut saws. Everybody else had fire packs. They had a backpack with two shovels and Pulaski in.
Pulaski's that funny axe with a point on one side and a kind of shovel on the other.
That's right. And the rules are that the people carrying the saws walk at the back of the line because they don't want you to make a quick turn or something and hitting somebody alongside the head with your crosscut.
These are the big crosscuts, the sort of 6-7 footers that are two-man saw, right?
That's right. That's right. This was before the time of chainsaws.
Yeah, I used to use one of those crosscuts with my father.
Oh, yeah. So you know what they are. And we went just a few more minutes, five minutes, 10 minutes at the most, on down the gulch. And Dodge broke out over a little finger ridge. And he saw that the fire had somehow got started in the bottom of the gulch as it was coming up the gulch towards us.
Coming up the north side that you were on.
It was actually coming up the whole bottom of the gulch, both sides. So he turned around. At that time, we could see smoke below us, but we couldn't see the fire. When he got to Kremensky and I, he said, "You guys throw those things down before you hurt somebody." So we dropped the saws. He knew that we were in trouble. We didn't say anything. He just said, "Throw those things down." So Kremensky and I fell in line, more or less, behind him. So we went from being in the back of the line to being almost in the front of the line.
But Bob, you must have known something was up if the foreman asked you to ditch the saws.
Yeah, we knew that so we weren't fighting fire anymore. We were going to go regroup someplace. And so then we started angling up the hill and away from the fire at the same time. And this slope in Mann Gulch is so steep that if you sit down, you have to dig your heels in to keep from sliding down the hill. So it's almost a cliff. I probably went for 5 minutes. He sent word back down the line for everybody to throw their tools away. Now you know for sure that you're in trouble. That's, they're supposed to be out fighting fire. If you're throwing your tools away, you're not firefighters anymore.
Did this mean the backpacks and everything were to go?
Backpacks and everything. But, and everybody but Jim Harrison did that. Jim Harrison was working for a tough old ranger in Helena. I guess he probably figured if I throw my fire pack away, I'll be in a heap of trouble, so he kept his. But then we were climbing for another 5 minutes or so, and we broke out as more the scatter chamber pretty well went away. It was just mostly a grassy slope. And Dodge stopped and took out a match, lit the grass on fire.
Where you guys were, right there.
Right there. And I was leaning up against one of the few trees that was still there, looking at him, and I wondered what in the heck was going on. I thought the boss had lost his mind and that he was trying to burn us up. If you look back down below, and there's this wall of flame, 60, 70 feet high. Sounded like a freight train coming up the hill. It's incredible. It's like standing on the runway when a jet airplane takes off. Came like a big blowtorch. It's just a huge roar. I could see the guys in the back of the line outlined against the fire. I knew that we had way more fire than we knew what to do with. And here the boss stops and lights a fire. And he survived by doing it.
With this wall of flame basically sweeping past him and not burning the one area that he cleared.
Right, he jumped over it.
How did he know to do that?
That wasn't a normal firefighting practice in those days.
Yeah.
And when they asked him about it, he said he didn't know. It just seemed like a good idea.
Like you. Obviously, would learn later that his boss, Mike Gulch, soaked his handkerchief with water from his canteen, held it over his mouth, and lay down in the ashes. Mike Gulch and Bob and one other man were the only ones of 16 firefighters who survived that 5 years. In just a moment, I'll talk more with Bob today about how he made it true with Mann Gulch. I'm Dick Gordon from American Public Media. This is The Soap.
That good guys up to there.
Hey, real quick, there's about 50 seconds of music. This is from the investigation. The investigator asked Dodge, did you think that the men understood your direction and heard you? And he said, There was no conversation with anybody until we got to where we dropped the tools on their ridge. So he didn't talk to anybody until that point. The investigator asked him, at what time did you explain it was getting pretty hot behind you? What reason did you give for dropping the tools? He said, it wasn't necessary. You could see the fire pretty close, and we had to increase our rate of travel some way right down there. The investigator asked him, did you think they were all impressed at the time at the urgency of the situation? And Dodge simply answered, I think they were. So that was his testimony after about that serious time.
I think I stamped past it, so come to the rest. So we'll move on.
Oh,
Yeah. We haven't decided, so I'll just push forward.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, it'll cut time out. So basically, the rest of the interview talks about the rescue mission, him going down, all asleep, them coming back up, listening to the folks, taking them out. Also talks a little bit about him re-engaging the smoke jumping and doing another gear, doing that. They want to demoralize these guys. I think that thing at the end was it's the guy, so, when your grandson or his friends out there wants to be a smoke jumper with, hell yeah, this is the best job I ever done in my life. A lot of freedom. I got to fly. He goes, lead group, parachuting. He goes, parachuting out of that airplane was amazing. He said his first jump on this fire, you're scared to death without jumping, but he was more scared of what the other folks would say he didn't jump. This was something. Tag on his off, but he said it was an incredible experience. Hit the ground, he's like, I love this and I want to do this. And he totally was in favor, even though the tragedy he went through and everything else, he was a proponent of smoke jumper fire. I thought that was pretty cool. So, and I think we're moving on to you.
so we're just going to skip that part.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, so
I talked to setup.
aftermath. Media sensationalism, like you said, just like today. This is the article that was in Life magazine right here. A very public investigation, accusations of incompetence. And I want to read something that Ranger Jansen wrote to Wag Dodge. I'm just going to read a couple excerpts. You picked the right spot to do the job. If I had been in your place, I don't think I would have had the presence of mind enough to do what we did. And he wrote this letter in the middle of the board of review from Ranger Jansen to Wag Dodge. He goes on, another section, had quite a visit with Henry Toll Sr. Henry Toll Sr. was the father of Henry Toll Jr., former Forest Service employee who was very angry about Toll's name. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. The other night, when he had a second trip to Mann, Gulch, Wag, don't be bothered by whatever he spouts off about. Sure, he can see a lot of things now like we all can with hindsight and possession of all the facts, but I don't think he would have done any better or different under the same circumstances. He strikes me as sort of a psychopathic case, like a lot of old rangers who are embittered by injustices within the service, real or imaginary. The last thing he says is, well, Wag, maybe I shouldn't write to you this way, but I wanted you to know that here is one guy who believes you did the right thing and you were plenty okay, and you've got a hell of a lot of guts to take what you have as magnificently as you have. So, folks, there was a lot of public acrimony that went on. It was very public and a very bloody court of investigations. So the lawsuits, 8 lawsuits by the family, led by Henry Toll Sr. They dragged on through the court system for 6 years. In 1954, the 9th District Court dismissed them. And the lawyer who argued the government's case was Warren Berger, who later became Chief Justice in the Supreme Court. Interesting little factoid. One outcome that did happen is Congress increased death benefits for families of survivors. Government employees killed in the line of relief, $200 to $400. Steve, getting out of the average. And conspiracy theories were then, and they bounced out. And there's a lot of discrepancy when you read some of the details of the testimony which is really typical because firsthand witnesses are notoriously unreliable, right? So all those little discrepancies spawn all the conspiracies and changes. Carlton talked about the task force. Mann Gulch was one of 5 major tragedies in that 20-year period that the task force looked at. 20 fired in Poland. Standard firefighting orders, the fire lab, a lot of other things came out of that report. I would encourage every career firefighter to read that 1957 report. I think it had as much impact on the fire service as the South Canyon fire in Trinidad did. Changes that came out of that report were incredible.
Here, titling the report.
It was the one that Carlton talked about, the 1957 task force to reduce chances of men burning reduce the chances of men dying while burning by which the title is pretty specific, and I liked it, but I can't repeat it right now because it's 3 lines long. But it's the one Carlton referred to, and it even ends, that very last paragraph ends with a warning about the future of urban interface problems and people moving hands for one another. So 1957. It was like almost an afterthought. And they're like, oh, by the way, we got one more thing. It's an incredible report. 1957, right?
Fox tried.
Okay, profile of the group. 2 things. 9 rookies. That was their first jump. 4 second-year men. Sully, his first jump, he had spent 2 years on his listener recipe prior to that. That's how he was able to lie. He's telling me he was 20 because he had 2 years of experience. Rumsey also his first jump. Spent 1 year as a lookout and 1 year as a fire guard. In his testimony, he said, I've been to a couple of fires and asked about his fire experience. That was his response. 12 to 15 jumpers were military veterans. I've got a couple stories about it. Kelman had been with the Forest Service for 5 years, Ford the jumper. Before he went to work for the Forest Service, he island hopped across the Pacific as a Navy corpsman with the Marines. White Dodge had been with the Forest Service for 10 years, 9 as a jumper, and he was a Coast Guard veteran. I think prior to the war, actually. A few stories that are notable. David Tabone, world traveler, he was older, 28, had been to Europe before the war, and was with the 101st Airborne in the Battle of the Stone, was injured, comes back, goes to school, goes into smoke jumping. David Tabone is Jewish for years and years and years. He had a cross up there.
No.
And finally, when they went back and redid the monuments recently, you've got a Star of David now. There's still the pillars now right there. So, Jim Harrison. Jim Harrison had been smoke jumping for 2 years before becoming fire guard on the district. And he was the one that hiked over from Meriwether over the top. He was actually the initial attack fire guard on this. He quit smoke jumping to become a fire guard because mom thought smoke jumping was too dangerous. Pretty ironic. Stanley Reba.
Standard.
I think something about that. Yeah, he's on the far right. Stanley Reba. In forestry school back east, was just finishing his National Guard training. Just got married, left his wife in Minnesota, and came out and she was first year jumper. And his wife never recovered, committed suicide 10 years later. And the last story I want to tell here is Henry Toll, and I think we've gone over that. Henry Toll, his father was, I got ahead of myself with that, but his father was a former Forest Service ranger who led the lawsuit efforts by several families. So those are 4 stories of that. This book, this one, which I really like. It tells the personal story of everybody. This is one I've encouraged equally with Young Mist Firemen. Survivors, flag dodged. Never jumps again. Goes up a couple times, but never goes out of the airplanes. Dies 5 years later from Hodgkin's disease.
Is that
Walter Rumsey, successful career as a soil scientist, moves all over the country, makes one statement 12 years later, writes it down for the story for his family. And after he died, the National Smoke Jumper Association published that statement in one of their magazines. And we can talk about Sully, Rumsey. Both of those guys went into Mann Gulch with McLean in the late 70s to help him get started on his book. Very shortly after that one visit, Rumsey dies in an airplane crash, commercial airplane crash, coming back from a work assignment. And Robert Jansen, he's kind of the forgotten soul in this in a lot of ways. He led recovery tours. He led recovery. He took families back into Mann Gulch all that summer and fall to want to visit. When he got off the recovery, he was unappraised. And he took several masses. This is an interesting story. They couldn't get the smell of death off him. Asked his wife to burn his uniform and all the stuff that he wore during the recovery phase. He wrote letters to many of the families. We're behind time. I was going to read an excerpt out of his for Harrison, but I won't do that. But he ends up asking for a transfer. They eventually transfer him. He ends up getting caught up in McCarthy Red Scare and be accused of being a communist. So he became unpromotable for like 5 years and stuck where he was. He contracted a rare liver disease that required multiple hospitalizations. He died before he turned 50 from that. So a lot of tragic ends for even the survivors on this. One thing I want to mention, the National Smoke Jumper Association this year is doing an effort to put a little plaque, a wreath, all of their actual graves around the country. They're putting together small wreaths to go do that on the 5th of August. And then Harry Gisborne, real quick. Harry Gisborne, he was an early pioneer in fire behavior science. He becomes enthralled with studying the fire behavior on Mann Gulch, teams up with Jansen, goes through all the notes, all the observations, all the statements, makes visits, ends up dying of a heart attack in Mann Gulch on a visit in November. He's sometimes referred to as the 14th victim of this fire. So, he's kind of considered the father of the Missoula fire line. Yeah. All right. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
So,
good. You did.
yeah. So I want to roll back a little bit. Staff rights come to us. I was real fortunate in 2001 to be part of the group that went back to Marine Corps University to look at how they develop leaders. We looked at sand table exercises, we looked at leadership reaction course, and we went on this trip through Gettysburg, 2 days in buses with 160 brand new young captains, right? And we stop at all these places, and they're teaching about the evolution of the 3 days of Gettysburg. And they're running these guys through the grill about the decisions and who the leaders were and what they did. And the group of us, there was about 6 of us, we looked at each other and went, shit, we can do this with ours. And so we started pushing to bring staff rifles to wildland fire service. So this is our first exploratory staff ride. We teamed up with Marine Corps University and Wharton School of Leadership and did a combination of Little Bighorn and Mann Gulch. And in this picture, it's not a great picture, but there's Michael Hussein, the guy who talked about the lectures about this, and a couple of his professors out of Wharton. Right there is Eric Carlson, Colonel Eric Carlson. He's the director of operations for Marine Corps University. He's got a couple of his instructors with him, and some fire folks from the national office and a couple of regional offices. We walked through this, and that was kind of the start of the effort to bring staff rights into the wildland fire service.
What year was that?
To be, so 2002, but we visited Marine Corps University in 2001, and this is our first one was in 2002. Yeah, 23, 26 live with this. You can see the Marine Corps University public having cares and what wings the ships today, right? So that's a little bit of a synopsis about how we brought the staff rights into our business. And real quick, we won't go into that. But if we have a resource, it's a staff right library. Carl made reference to this yesterday also. We made efforts to do staff right packages on a lot of our major incidents. But there's also resources in here for folks that do your own staff rights. But I know down here in Southern California, you guys are way ahead of the rest of the world. The Loop, the Spanish Ranch, and Esperanza, and Cedar are delivered pretty regularly by the Forest Southstone Forest. And the local departments are on it too. I know LA County has done Glen Allen, Orange County's done Laguna, LA County's done Griffith Park this year, right? Or LA City.
Yeah.
And talking to guys, we did a station this year also, right? So, and I worked with the Chumash Fire Department in Santa Barbara County, and we did a paint fire. Chris was part of the group. We did his children's we did the paint fire just 2 weeks ago. So Southern California really embraced it. So I applaud all you guys. And that's part of what happens here. It's the forest fire with this and material stuff. And it's go fire.
So, I really got involved in doing staff rights to help the staff rights. I'm trying to get all the other folks at my department in my area to start doing staff rights. I think they're very valuable. There's a lot to be learned. A lot of situational awareness is really important. I think you look at all these staff rights, kind of amazes me to really think about it. I was thinking about this yesterday as Carlton was talking about 49 we had. Mann, Gulch, 57, we had the 66 that live. I mean, those are under 10 years each. We're killing lots of folks. We got to change what we're doing. So there's a lot to be learned from these, and so we do. So this little group of us have got together and started doing a staff ride every year. And our first one was Mann Gulch. We did this 2 summers ago in July. The boat ride, the gates of the mountain, beautiful. It's river's amazing. Rented a boat, we went up the Missouri River Carriage, just some of the shots that we took on the way up. We entered Mann Gulch, then we hiked up and did a staff ride. And basically, what we do is we do research ahead of time, just like a regular staff ride. The night before we have an introduction, dinner, do a barbecue, make out to you adult beverages, kind of like the bingo last night. But anyways, we get time to talk, we come around, we talk about what we're going to do. The next morning we get up, we go do the staff ride, we look back, we have to close out, we kind of talk about what's in London and everything. Then we just get a veg breakfast somewhere, just hang out, and it's really good, learn a lot. Here's breathers, I'm Boker, Bill Malumbi, he's, someone in Shanghai to some of this, but good stuff. Dan Buckley, Brian Schultz, taking a break as we're hiking the country there. Spectacular country that. But looking in the canyons in Mann Gulch, you can see how steep it is in there. Really steep country. We're looking at myriads of weather ridges in the background there, kind of listening around, checking the grounds out. Direction the fire start back up in there. I'm looking up there, talks about walk it out. It's interesting. It's kind of spiritual. It's kind of just a feeling when you go on that road. There's a fatality side. There's stuff left over. Like I found an old cast with she rats where they were eating. They found shelters and it was like that. Like fellas to say, you just see that stuff where it is. Just looking up the slope, how steep it is up in there. It's funny, the day before those lightning storms there, so we're up in Mann Gulch, so there's a lightning fire on the north side, and that's the rescue Gulch and the drop the helicopter. A little ironic, And that's looking from the slope up there. You can see how steep that slope is, and that's where Soleil and Rosie came left and over the top of that. I mean, you had to be a really good fire chase to even up that hill. I mean, I know I was talking about saying. And this is the sites that are marked out there. You should kind of watch until the process the book. Start date is the country. You can see the kind of the fuel loading in there. It's kind of similar to what it was. It'd be a few less trees. That's looking up where they went to that rock stream. It's that little gap there to get out to the inside there. First Jim there has up there. Did a good job. So look to the west, across the ridge there. Beautiful looking down toward the Missouri. This is Rescue Gulch here. It went over the top of it down, so there's the floor. And so we started this group called Old Men and Fire. We started a website. There we are. That's it. So that's our group, and that's what we call ourselves. So we did Hauser last year. They built it Hauser for here last year. This year we're going to Idaho, the 1910 Fires Pulaski Trail. So our goal is every year we're going to get a site and go do a staff ride. We're trying to try and pass on the information. It's kind of our little saying here. A group of old violent firefighters sitting around telling stories, sharing beverages as they do. That wouldn't be a great idea. So on a road trip with a few towns and visit some old fires. Walk around the grounds, discuss what happened, honor those lost, and the progress perhaps inspired other firefighters to learn about our village, their history. Which is true, there's a lot to say for the district there. So there's websites up now. I'll let Jim talk about it if you have any questions, but there's the 100 fires, research fire that every firefighter should know. It's about 100 fires in the Western United States. Ooh. You know the words, huh? Yeah, questions? Is there any questions?